The incredibilum voluptatum, or incredible delight, or let's say it this way, the immeasurable delight. We'll see why this way is better in a second, of accelerationism. So let's look at accelerationism on an analogy with Leo Strauss's claim. I think it's actually laid out in the Stanford Encyclopedia article on Leo Strauss. If you want to take a closer look at it, independent from the way I do always a kind of Gabrabble version, which is more appropriate to the way I'm currently thinking about it and less appropriate to giving an ample or loud expression to it, which is fit for the television audience, let's say. So, Leo Strauss has said that faith and reason both can be demonstrated from either the point of view of faith or from the point of view of reason, because taking the case which Leo Strauss was always hunting down, like a quarry in the forest, of the idea that is now the most powerful in the elite universities. He didn't use the phrase elite universities, but he would have said in intellectual life, or which has the most, in contradistinction to that which makes the most sense or has the most cognitive dignity, as he would say there's also something that's in power, an idea that's in power. So the idea that's in power is that there's a fact-value distinction, and that it's possible for scientists to demonstrate the facts, but not the political direction, not what is right or wrong, not what the ethos of the people or the ethics of the people should be. Taken that this view that there are facts, and facts are supposed to be, if you push it to the furthest position, they're supposed to be actually exist even without human beings. So you see the problem. It's something that's supposed to be independent of us, we're treating as the greatest intellectual authority for ourselves. So it's, in other words, it's something that's arbitrary with respect to ourselves, and it could do all kinds of crazy things. So what Strauss is saying, if this is the situation, then there's the so-called flight from reason. If this is the apotheosis of reason, the so-called objective fact, then there's a certain sense that since it has nothing to do with us, and since it may even be very terrible for us, the truth may be terrible, as Nietzsche said, where the truth again means the belief that everyone today has in the authority of the sciences, especially the physical sciences. And then there's all kinds of sort of triages that can be done to claim which is the most fundamental, usually put as physics, and which are the so-called hard sciences, which are the so-called soft sciences, and so on. But eventually, one sees in the pure case something which one might very well reasonably fly away from, because it's not, on the whole, like the old Wissenschaft, which was seeking the good of the human being. It's rather seeking this arbitrary faith in something that it calls reality, which was established in the discussion between a claque of white males, let's say, to use the modern way of depreciating people. Descartes at the center of this sort of, how did they say it? It's in the United States vernacular to use the phrase cabal in this kind of sense, in political sense. So he's Descartes at the center, and then Francis Bacon and Galileo and Hobbes and some other people who were Kepler, and just a little before that there was somebody called Copernicus, and all these people have this huge so-called vested interest in maintaining that there's this thing called quote-unquote reality, defined as not being a secondary quality but being the primary quality in this Lockean sense. So Galileo already had a version of that, and then you can point back to the sort of times when it wasn't yet thematic or necessary for anyone in the beginning of philosophy. But when you see that this most powerful idea as a specific trajectory came through, and in fact we can even look at the small claque of men who invented it and how it became popular and it became a meme and so forth. I mean, to speak metaphorically, but whatever. But you could see that this is something that could plausibly be, we could go away from it and choose something else. So this is what Strauss is saying, is like, from the point of view of reason, you could go away from this, which is presenting itself as the highest intellectual authority, so-called science of the fact or of reality, versus this remainder of the human sense of right and wrong, of saying yay or nay to something, even in, because so you could even look at that, it just, since we're on the topic, you could even consider there's a difference between the bare realization that there's an entity can be set its will against something, right? Think of a small child, think of the will of a child that won't be moved by anything, fixed against all external considerations. There's this will that comes autonomously from the self, and then there's various ways of saying this yay or nay saying, which definitely does come from a center of a Dasein, could be regarded as a question of good or bad. It could be regarded in rational or irrational, or in other ways, or of willing, strong and weak wills, or I think that's how Nietzsche says it. There's only strong wills and whatever the opposite of the strong wills is, I suppose weak wills. So taken this way, we can see that there's Strauss has a point in saying, you could reasonably go to this, which so now let's put in the plug in the so-called accelerationism notion that, okay, you've already plugged into the Galileo science is the most powerful view version, later more powered by Newton, later more powered by Schrodinger, by these early philosophers of physics like Einstein, who said everything is relative to the particular Dasein. So it's like things are relative because you actually have to take the measurement in a specific place, and it's not just thinking of a Euclidean grid in the mind. So things are relative when you consider how math mixes in with the historical world, right? So it's this deep lodging in philosophic thought is what powered people like Heisenberg and Einstein, which you totally see the want of, the total deprivation of in the current physicists, who are just have been constantly told not to ridicule all thinking and only sort of fill in the dots, or if they're to do something spectacular, it's supposed to come only through advanced thinking in topology, or in some rigorous way, which already, you remember that stupid Indian mathematician that got so much fame because the British at Oxbridge liked him and so forth. But he was even told, the way you're doing mathematics, oh no, it's not rigorous enough. You have to do it the way we English do it. So in this sense, basically, physicists are being told you have to do it the received traditions, wondrous God's rules must be followed, and then something good will happen. The whole background of being able to discuss what physics is also disappears when the power of this Galilean notion keeps compounding century after century of propaganda getting behind it. So in that sense, we see already how Strauss kind of puts a doubt to this acceleration view before we even state it. But what it basically means is if you simply give up all opposition to this view, for instance, opposition in the form of Hinduism, opposition in the form of Taoism, Confucianism, opposition in the form of Catholic Christianity, opposition in the form of the philosophy of Dewey, let's say the progressivist philosophy of Dewey, but simple dedication to going further into the non-human technology as much as possible, into the so-called object-oriented ontology, then is a gamble. So it's you could see that in the horizon of those questions that Nick Bostrom raises when he's talking about maybe it could be that every time a civilization gets to this stage using a thought experiment, it self-destructs in some way, like the AI, as Peter Thiel and others are saying. He says, Peter Thiel says the people that he knows in Silicon Valley and in California who do AI for a living, since they do it for a living, they can't stop doing it, but they all are kind of working a little bit slowly because they have mostly come to the conclusion that it's going to be terrible once it comes to power. It's going to be the same thing as the ruin, just as physics has been totally ruined, so that you used to have all this wonderful creativity. So you're always talking about the early 20th century problems of physics, of quantum physics versus normal physics, of the quid-bit starting to break away from Leibniz digital math, of a computer of a totally qualitatively different kind than computers that we have today, so that we'll probably, once quantum computing comes in, by the way, we won't no longer understand what computer means, because a computer will have become a genus. So we only know really what we call computers are digital computers. Once you get a computer that's based on a quid-bit or quantum mechanics, it's going to be a totally different, it's going to be a qualitatively different thing. We're just going to attach the word, for a while, computer to it. It will probably take on new names in the context. So once you think about how powerful the creativity at that time was and how human it was, because human problems were trying to be solved, compared to what you get today, where it's almost all some kind of either so-called making it, increasing in how much power the cell phone can take in, at what rate, and things like this. This so-called, improvements of some incremental way, which are supposedly which can go on forever. This kind of infinities of improvements within something that already exists, and then on occasionally hitting on by chance on something people like through the market and so on. But you also run into waste a lot of effort on things people don't like. So going further into this way of doing things is accelerationism, I think, in a lot of ways, but also in the sense that it's a kind of desire not to just improve this way, but to hit a crisis is the real meaning. So then the risk is then these Bostrom questions, as I was saying, of maybe you get to a certain place and it's just the AI kills you, right? Or I guess Zizek is saying even worse, you get this total... at the level of Brownian motion, you get a kind of a stagnant swamp, where somehow human beings no longer are just like ants, right? Like we can't affect anything because the cosmos that we're in is so much at such a low level that it doesn't respond to human discourse. So I think this is one direction which can be put in this axis that Leo Strauss makes between different ways that could be reasoned wagers or gambles. I don't know if it has as much credibility because it's really it's a kind of suicidal. It's based on just saying something on analogy to the people that say real change only happens when there's a kind of uh, a bloodshed event of some major kind. Likewise, it's saying like if you go further into unbridled, inhuman belief in quantity as reality in this Galilean um, gamble of the imaginary space of the total vacuum, um, then yeah, there could be something totally unpredictable could happen, and it would happen to all human beings, and maybe it's a good idea. But this is a very, yeah, so on the whole, it looks very reckless, right? So it's kind of suicidal. It's kind of like if you think the world is terrible already, then why not, have this aleatory music play because maybe it'd be better. But on the whole, it doesn't have. Without further details, I don't see that much appeal to it.